minutes. I'm going to be able to go home early and do whatever, right? But I'm very happy to see the number of folks here. I was actually sort of curious as to how this sort of subject was going to be received from an interest standpoint. Sounds kind of innocuous, not much, kind of generic, but obviously it's going to be a really vital part of any process of starting a city, right? And I want to start with a couple of caveats. I kind of have in the previous lectures that we've had, kind of talked about, well, I've done this, I did that for a couple of decades, I know all about that, but this is something I have never actually gone through the startup of a city before. I've procured services, gotten contracts done, hired people, obviously. So I've done all the individual pieces, but I've never actually seen them put together in action as the city has started up. So in that sense, I just wanted to put it out there that I'm kind of an amateur in here. I was saying that a little bit earlier, and I think this will be a great opportunity to gather some of these questions that maybe we haven't thought of and kind of plug them into the process. So in effect, what we're talking about here isn't really so much what the transition plan is, as opposed to what the process to get to one will really more look like, okay? So that's kind of the approach I took as we went out and pondered these things. And hopefully that'll be clear and will engender some thought and reaction as we go along. So Nick, want to go to the second one there? Okay, so as we thought about transition plan, we talked about purpose, components, and process. And of course, purpose of this is of the transition plan is get the city set up, right? And there's a scope to it. It's wide, it's broad. There's a schedule, obviously. You got to have resources. But as important to the actual plan or getting the city set up is the community involvement. How do you get the community either educated is one way to put it, or involved in the actual putting together that transition. So that's something I know the committee's talked about a lot together. And then of course this point here of it being a living document. Obviously, if this vote were to pass, we're something like 18 months from an actual day of incorporation. So obviously that's going to be changing and expanding and that as we go along. Major components of the plan. We're going to talk about on the next slide, foundational assumptions. And what we mean by that is, okay, what are we actually seeing this as sort of hypothetically as we set up? What kind of form of government? What about the ordinances? Do we want to, how do we want to approach that? One of the specific questions that we've been talking about along that line is the Ogden Valley General Plan that's already in existence. Does the community feel like that is a good basis from which to go forward from a development? Do you want to start new? Do you want to modify it? What's good about it? What's bad about it? So, you know, that kind of thing. That's what we mean by foundational assumptions. City functions and operations. We've talked about that a lot in the other briefings and lectures. So you guys kind of know what we're talking about that already. We've talked about the various aspects that were budgeted, illustrated as to budget and function in the LRB study, right? Police, planning, general administration, some minor things even were covered, like we won't be running a waste management, or I'm sorry, a waste pickup service. Waste management of the corporation already does that, but apparently there is a little management and administration of that contract that the county figures we would be doing, or LRB did. So things like that were in there we've already talked about. Some of the stuff we haven't talked about are the behind the scenes sort of things that have to happen, right? You got to have a recorder to post meetings and take minutes and prepare for elections and all those sorts of things. You're definitely going to want to have a lawyer or attorney or legal services right off the bat. And that's for a number of reasons. One, protection. Two, that person is going to have the expertise and the experience to say, okay, this contract with entity so-and-so looks good, or it needs this or whatever. So you're gonna want to have some legal services pretty soon.
Can I ask you a question? So the county has a pretty good legal office downtown.
Yes.
Can we benefit from that at all? Because we're still county residents.
Right.
How does that work?
Great question. I would say that Yes, the short answer is yes. The longer answer is you're probably still gonna wanna have your own legal representation for like the contract service management. Also, another aspect of your question, which I've been kind of trying to hit on this point is, I think as a startup community, there are a lot of things about the county from a service provision standpoint that we should be taking advantage of. They've got a long experience, they've got people in place, we're gonna want to contract with some aspect of that. I don't know if we would want to like formally contract with their legal services, maybe. But even if we didn't, I think we should absolutely be consulting with them, especially for things like historically, how did this happen, right? How was that service conducted or why was it set up that kind of thing?
Example I was thinking about is the county has made commitments like development agreements, for example,
Yes,
that I think we're gonna inherit.
right.
It seemed to me that that would be something the county attorney should take on, and the getting that going is.
Right.
It might take a long time.
Yeah, it's a great example, if nothing more than us even just going, what's going on here at all, right?
Wayne, can you be sure you don't wander too far away from this for the people on the phone?
I was trying to make myself wander back over here even as.
Yes, and speak and repeat the question would also help.
Yes, I also forget that. So if anybody doesn't hear the question, raise your hand and remind me and I'll repeat the question too. I'm assuming everybody did hear what that question was about legal services to the county. Okay. So the back office stuff, that was what I was talking about in terms of things that might not necessarily see that we will need to provide for or get ready to provide for in a transition plan. A couple of other things that come to mind are liability insurance. There's at least 3 ways to go with that I'm familiar with as a city manager. So you have some choices there. None of them are very complicated, but you do have to put some thought into it and make a recommendation or decision. Let's see here. Let's talk a little bit more about organizational structure, sequence and time frame. We don't know a ton about that right now, but we can talk a little bit about that. I'm sure you have some questions there. Budget, we really sort of already seen illustrated in LRB. I think the LRB study. I think the important thing here to note is as sort of a starting place, it'll be modified, obviously, as we go through and start looking at actual service provision, negotiate contracts, that sort of thing. Those numbers will change somewhat. And the process. The point here is that there are resources out there to get us set up with a decent transition plan. And I'm not just talking about people that have done this before. I'm also talking about the people that are here in the community already that have expertise in whatever it might be, financial services or legal help or IT or things like that. So as we go through the plan, those are some of the things that we'll be looking at in the process. I'll give you an example. As I mentioned at the beginning of this discussion, I've done all these things individually, but I've never done them all at once, right? In sequence and saying, hey, and the last thing you want, as I was thinking along that line, is getting a call from the state saying, hey, you forgot to do this, which you should have done like 5 steps ago, right? So one of the things I've actually already gone out and done was contacted a old colleague. He's not old, our relationship's old, and asked him to give us some thoughts on this. And this particular person has done this in like 4 other cities. And so I bring that up as a point in that there are definitely people out there to rely upon or to query that could give us some information on that, right? Okay. So foundational assumptions. This list is not exhaustive. This is just sort of representative of, once again, if this went through. What are the thoughts, the philosophy, the hypotheticals maybe that we would be speaking about or trying to get together before the city actually incorporated? So let me take a step back there before we talk about the individual foundational processes. So this election takes place in November. Let's assume for a minute that it passes. You're then going to have roughly 11 months before the city actually starts up, right? And in that time frame, and again, I referred to this a little bit at the beginning, but as a community, you're going to want to decide what are the basic assumptions that we're proceeding from here? Do we want to do more, less, or the same development? What does it look like? Do we want to adopt and the reason I use this as an example is because lots of startup cities have done this in the past. They'll adopt the counties, that they reside in, their, municipal code whole, and then they modify it as they go along. Other cities that have started up have taken a whole group of people that were interested or expert or both or whatever, and they went, and then they went and looked at putting together a municipal code kind of from whole cloth. Meaning they didn't like draft it out themselves brand new. They did go look at other cities, but they take a piece here, they take a piece there. They kind of discuss it. We like this, we don't like that. Probably that process would be more custom to a city setup, but it would also be a lot more lengthy in process. It would be a lot more tough to get started, whereas the other one would be easier, but maybe not as custom to get going. So that's one of the big foundational questions this group, and by this group, I mean the community again, would be looking at examining. Update, notify Ogden Valley General Plan. I talked about this a little bit already. I don't know how familiar everybody in the group here is with the Ogden Valley General Plan, but it's, just by my look at it, it's pretty good documented. I know that a lot of effort went into it, and it seems to reflect pretty well at least what past community thought has been. I know it was done through a formal process with the Ogden Valley Planning Commission that the county had supported at the time. So at least from a recommendation basis, I would say that's probably a good tool to use and start with. But again, that's something the community should have input on. Contract with current service providers. In some ways, again, I've referred to this a little bit in prior discussions. Like, for example, we would want to probably, I'm saying probably, and when I say probably, I'm really saying probably 95% likelihood would want to contract with some of the larger services that we're just not going to be able to start up on our own. Sheriff Service for Police. Yes, Shannon.
May I take a step backwards? I had a quick question on the major assumptions and changing perhaps what we already have. So what is the process? So for instance, if we took what is already we've been working with regarding the general plan and the current ordinances that the county is working for in the Ogden Valley ordinances, could you look at those? There's a few major blaring errors that are causing problems.
Or that just aren't applicable. Maybe.
Yes,
yeah.
I mean, no longer applicable, but they do want to kick out. So during that lead up time or right after, can they be tweaked? And then is that one of the first orders of business? We have to pass what is being proposed?
Yeah, I would say, so great question. Yeah, I was going to say, so as I look at a list of all the elements and the things that are needed for startup, that list right now looks something like 3 pages long, but it includes little minute stuff as well as big stuff. And if I was thinking of the first 4, 5, or 6 things that you would do, that would definitely be one that I would think would be at the top of the list for getting prepared for. Now, to your exact question, let's say we get to November, this vote passes. How are you going to do that? Frankly, I would recommend that the committee kind of gets together. I think some of this conversation maybe happened already in terms of thoughts of who could participate, but assign a subcommittee or get a committee of residents together and examine exactly that question. Because here's the thing that they're going to be able to do. They're going to be able to make recommendations. They'll even be able to spell that out. They could have a formal document ready to go on the day that the city is incorporated or in the first meeting thereafter. But they can't adopt it. They can't make it real. All they can do is make it as available. In other words, let's refer back to that 4 or 5 or 6 things I was talking about, right? The thought would be, once again, referring to transition planning goal, all 4 or 5 of those things would be ready to adopt, day one, the first meeting, or at least ready for discussion. Now, from my own experience as a city manager, even adopting one ordinance that's specific to one question can take weeks or months, Right, yeah, exactly. So, that's gonna wanna be taken into consideration in terms of, all right, well, let's put together some sort of process so that we can at least get something functioning and operating, and then we can operate towards modification. Yes, sir.
Plus another question is, how is the authority given to whomever to develop this plan?
Yeah.
We have a lot of talented people that volunteer a lot of times.
So everybody could hear, okay.
But, just that.
Yeah.
Where's, does the authority come?
Right, so it's a great question. In that 11-month period, or even starting now, oh, sorry, let me repeat the question for anybody who didn't hear. So the question was, well, where does that authority derive, or how is it created, or how is it set up to come up with whatever that foundational picture looks like, right? Is that a fair reflection of the question? And the real answer is there is no authority until the city's actually incorporated, and then the elected officials become the authority. Prior to that, once again, through volunteers or through the committee or people who want to participate, you've got to come together in some sort of a structure. And again, it sounds sort of vague, but it's not really that complicated. And it's really not that difficult to actually adopt. The more difficult question is kind of answering the questions like Shannon just asked. Is it okay to adopt the whole county code and make that recommendation to this new elected group? Or do we want to modify it before?
So is the accepted by the people that the committee is already runs with, they set up a plan and proceed with it?
Yeah.
Plus, follow-up question is, when is the mayor, or if that's the form that we choose, or the councilman, when are those elections and when are they chosen?
Okay, great question. So answer to the first part, which is, I already forgot the first part of the question again.
How does it
The
get?
committee is.
Oh, yeah. How is the committee doing that? So the answer is, it's really sort of more of a default by who's willing to be involved, right? The committee wasn't appointed by anybody. They just had an interest and they came together. And I have watched them go out and reach out to various people that have expertise here or whatever, just interest. Yes.
Just a question. I don't know if we have an answer yet, but in most elections, person is elected.
Can't hear in the
In most elections, we'll pick on the presidential because we're all aware of that coming up. Someone's elected on election day, but they really don't have the power until they get sworn in.
Mhm.
And that usually happens sometime in January. So, and even, I don't know if the incorporation will magically occur the day after election day.
The election, no, it won't. So good point.
Yeah.
Well, wait.
And to your, well, let me answer the other part of the question first, from the election standpoint, and then I'll let you go forward with that. So once again, there's no formal question to answer your formal structure to answer your question as to who would have authority or is in charge. And keep in mind, again, you're just making a recommendation to the body that then gets elected. But as to the election question itself, that will happen, or that process will start getting put into place as soon as November happens. My understanding at that point, and there might be people out here that know more than me on this, Kim maybe, or Nick, is that the Lieutenant Governor's office has defined that process. We know what the election process looks like. That's been run many times. It's really just more of a question of who's actually doing the grunt work of the proper advertising, filing for candidates, all that sort of thing. But I can tell you this, that takes place in a process that runs really, frankly, formally, starting in roughly May timeframe until that following November again, when the election actually happens. So I think that answers.
So one last piece. So should this pass in November, we're not a city yet, right? We don't become a city and have our own leadership until the
January.
following year. Yes. Well, when our leadership is voted in. And then we get a certificate from the Lieutenant Governor's office saying you are now certified to be a city. So for that year between 24 and 25, these are the sorts of things as a populace, we come together and decide what we want to do and how we want to go about it. And the idea is that those elected people that take over aren't starting from a blank slate wondering, whoa, what do we do now?
Right.
They're given some guidance, and hopefully these align with the visions of the community and the visions of those people that got elected. So that's kind of the process that we envision will work here.
Right, so let me reiterate that time frame again, and then I'm gonna go to Kim real quick, because I didn't want to leave him hanging. So vote for the city's incorporation, yes or no, would happen November this year, 2024, right?
And that's a yes, by the way?
So that would take place, and then assuming it was a yes, then it would be 11 months. During which that time, the election process for the
Leadership.
new elected officials would be set up. That would be all being ready. This transition plan process would be, and once again, can't force that on the elected officials. All you're really doing is making recommendations and trying to make the job easier for them when they start up. But that would happen in that sort of May 25 timeframe, November 25 election of officials, January 1 or sooner, by the way, incorporation of the city, and then start operations January 26. Okay, I'm gonna get to you, ma'am. Kim, I'm gonna.
I like what Nick said, but I think it's kind of more than that. The last thing we want is to elect a city council and mayor whose primary job is to build a business, to build an organization. I think what we want to do is I'd like you to adjust your remarks to the different target.
Mm-hmm.
And that the target is that when the city council is elected, that they can see a clear path to every single thing you're talking about. How does reporting happen? How does, because we don't want to have to elect people who are like the machinery
Sure.
people. We want leaders.
Right.
So that's what I think we should be thinking of as a transition.
Well, that's what it
So when
is.
these people get
Yeah.
the deck.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. That's what is happening, or that's what the elements of a transition plan will include.
But
Again, the point.
And that's not authority.
No.
That's
No.
just a whole lot of volunteers building
Right.
a good organization that'll work for the
How
valley.
about the
Right.
car is ready to drive?
Yes.
Yes,
A
okay.
good one.
This lady back here first, and then you, ma'am.
I have two questions. My first one is basically just asking for affirmation on whether or not I'm understanding this correctly. And that is that what I'm hearing from you is that we're not actually going to hear what changes to the ordinances of the municipality are being proposed until after the November vote on whether we want to incorporate or not.
I would say that's fair.
Okay.
Absolutely. I mean, what are we now? Roughly 90 days-ish, something like that, until November. And this effort, at least as far as I know, hasn't started yet from what would the ordinance look like? So yeah, I would say that's fair.
Okay. Let's track my commentary on that. But my other thing was, so in that 11 months, what happens? Who's in charge? If someone wants to sell their property and a developer wants to buy it, what happens?
Great question. Okay, so the question was, what's in charge while in the median time frame, the 11 months? The county's still in charge.
There's 11 months.
Yep. Yeah, ma'am.
I just was thinking of maybe a metaphor that would help explain what I think you're trying to say. So I think it's much like when someone gets elected in Washington, D.C., a senator, congressman or something, they often don't write the bills. There are other interested parties that write the bills and hand it to the senator, and then they propose it to the Congress, and
Right.
it goes through that process. So I see it as a process where everybody in the community, if they want to get involved, could help shape
Right.
what the new city looks like.
Yes.
Is that fair?
Yes, and that's a message I want to kind of try to keep hitting over and over again. The more involvement from the community that is happening in that process, then the better product you're going to have come a year or 11 or 12, 13 months from November, right? The more unity or the more buy-in you'll have from the community for whatever that foundational process and foundation looks like.
So it's not that the committee has any authority, it's
They do
just
not.
that these are the people that are interested
Right.
in creating a better environment for the for the citizens. And so whoever wants to get involved in shaping that would be welcome.
Excellent. So have you already volunteered?
Well, yes. Yeah.
Because that is actually probably the most salient point of this whole presentation tonight. The transition plan is going to be a shot, right? It's going to be an arrow at a target. Will it hit the target? The more involvement that there is and the more participation and buy-in and build up to that, the closer to the bullseye that hit will be, or that shot will be. I'm going to ask you, Shannon, so, but yes, okay, I knew there was somebody right in the middle.
I was just wondering, do you know of a source where we could get a facilitator, or if there are groups of people that are kind of in that business that would come in and live with us in the process of doing this, they can kind of keep this ball rolling? I mean, everybody's got ideas, but for somebody that can tie all the loose ends together in the process.
I do. Most of those people are paid consultants. I think your committee's actually done a pretty good job up to this point, but the committee is going to have to examine that question, say, okay, who could do that? Who'd be willing to do that? How would you pay them? Or are they willing to do it for free? Is there somebody that's retired or available and has some time here in the valley that would do that, that's in support of it? That kind of thing.
Or a former city manager.
I go back to Missouri where my family's in September for 3 months. I'll be happy to zoom in for whatever you guys got going on. Sir, I did forget you in the brown shirt.
Just a quick point, to the point over here, we're saying the committee, and in my mind, it's a committee.
Yeah.
There could be multiple committees.
Absolutely.
It's up to the elected leaders to decide whose advice they choose to follow and how they choose to modify that advice when they implement it. So it could very well be that there's a group that goes out and just copies and pastes West Valley City's ordinance that says we're done, and another group that says, no, I'm gonna go copy and paste, I don't know, Ogden's or something, you know? And so then there's no the committee in my mind.
Right.
There are people who are offering their advice to the elected leaders, and it's up to them.
So I'm glad you brought that up.
To listen to and to.
Right. I'm glad you brought that point up because I was a little afraid to bring it up myself. Which is, that's exactly right. If we don't have a body, a collective group, a participating community that is sort of largely and wholly and behind some particular effort along those lines, you very well could have 2 or 3 groups running for office that say, yeah, I totally like what the committee came up with, or no, I hate it, and I'm going to do something entirely different, and I'm going to run this whole slate of elected people, and we'll see who wins, you know? So again, that's just another way of illustrating the point that the more the community comes together, the more people participate and sort of build that momentum and mass for, hey, this is why we did it or are doing it. This is what we like. This is what we want to have. The more likely that is going to happen. I can't even remember now who was the last. Was it you, ma'am?
I just put my name up, so.
Was it you, Shanna? I think it was Shanna. Okay, I'm gonna go with Shanna, and then this.
Beth.
Beth,
Well, you took pretty much summed up what I was going to say. To me, the leadership's responsibility is to create a vehicle that's efficient and well-run that allows for broad community participation in a smooth, effective manner that all interests can be brought together and represented. You know, in any public administration class that you take is the more input you have, the more voices and the broader range of voices you have, the better quality product you're going to end up with. It's not the easiest and it's not the smoothest. It's the most cumbersome system to follow, but in the end, you have the best product.
Right.
And so leadership is being able to provide that vehicle to ensure that everyone's voice gets heard.
Okay, we're gonna go to Beth, and then this gentleman again, whose name he's introduced. What is it again? Steve, who's introduced himself to me, and I keep forgetting, and then the gentleman over there in the hat. Okay, yes, Beth.
As we look at other cities, do they have to be Utah cities, Or can we, if we're familiar with a place that we lived before, for example, that seemed well-run
Right.
and et cetera, can we use that? So I'm from Ohio,
Uh-huh.
and just wondering if that, don't look up where I lived before.
Right.
Because that's non-applicable here.
So great question. Everybody heard it, right? Everyone, I just want to make sure I'm checking. So my response to that would be twofold. The first one is when I was in city management, we always went all over the nation looking for the best ideas for some particular policy problem or question we had, right? So yes, I think it's good to look out. The second part of that same response is it's a little more difficult to go out of state or to different states because how they're set up statutorily in the state they're in may be different and not applicable. So you just have to be careful. Okay, Steve.
You're talking about these committees and stuff working with potential elected leaders or the elected leaders. What I'm wondering about is for the transition plan, while we're starting to sugar this thing together, there are no elected leaders.
Right.
So are we talking about that we need to form like a steering committee and have that sort of?
Yeah.
Or what that actually determines the course we're gonna take?
Yeah.
Or whatever to
Yeah.
get us a transition plan by the time we need a transition.
Nuts and bolts question. So I would just say, just given how I've seen this moving forward, that anybody who's interested in doing that should reach out to the folks that are on this body that I've been calling the committee, which may not necessarily be the committee, right? So Shanna, Brandy, I almost called you Brandy, sorry about that. Nick, and everybody that's on the group. So I would say reach out to them.
So you mean
They've already got
it's
it.
not the committee, or is there a committee, or is it the sponsors?
No. Well, I think I'm referring to the same people. I think that's right. So yeah, I mean, to me seems like a more logical way to go than to just try now at this point to set up a whole different group, which I know isn't what you were saying or suggesting, but you're already a good ways down the line here. And folks have been working on some of these aspects, so I would get with them. Okay, sorry, I didn't forget you in the hat.
Did I hear right that after we vote yes or no for 11 months, the county is still in charge? Is that correct?
That's correct.
Given the fact that we all are voting yes or no to hold down growth, is there any way once we vote yes to have any say over a gold rush in that 11 months?
Yes, there
on
is.
the property and the development.
Yeah, yes, there is, but no, not with actual authority. So the way you can do that really basically is go lobby the county commissioners and say, hey, this is going to happen. Oh, it's in our interest to work together. We're going to want a contract service with you in a lot of different ways. Please work with us here. And there are actually formal ways they can influence that, but we would have to be able to convince them to do that.
Such as.
Okay, all right. Well, so again, one of these things I didn't really want to bring up.
Well, you kind of have to rely on, part of this is just maintaining good relationships.
Yeah, for sure.
And respectful relationships when we go through this process.
You can't hear a word.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. It's just a matter of also, excuse me. There you go. This is about to be successful, we need to maintain good and respectful relationships
It's vital.
with our colleagues in the county. Because we're still gonna live in Weber County. We want to live in a locally elected city, governed by a locally elected group of officials. But we need to work on good relationships and hopefully work on that being reciprocated by the existing officials. So there we go.
Okay, we're on slide
Hey,
one.
What's that?
We're on slide one.
Okay.
I thought this was gonna be really a lot faster. Did I miss anybody?
What were you what didn't you want to bring up?
I still don't want to bring it up. I mean, again. So,
There's a question back here.
okay, I'll go to him. Yes, sir. And I won't forget you, ma'am.
All this sounds
good, but it all depends on who's running it as to how it goes.
That's right.
And, you know, I wish we had some information, who wants to be what in this new city.
Yeah.
Before we vote to whether we want them or to incorporate them.
Yeah.
And
You know,
I think we're getting the horse behind the cart in some ways.
I don't know because nobody has talked to me about this. I have no clue as to who would be interested, who would not. But I would imagine that after that vote happens in November, you're going to start seeing that conversation.
Is it gonna be too late then?
No,
Well, I know they have to convince us to vote for them.
right.
So it would be kind of nice to have some idea beforehand whose ideas might be put in force there.
Well, I'll try to take 30 seconds and talk about that a little bit. People who run for elected office are often highly hesitant to commit to do so, lots of times up until the last day they can file. And there's lots of reasons for that, right? It's not necessarily nefarious. It's just, well, I think my buddy might want to run, or I don't really want to run unless this is happening, or, whatever. So it's hard to get, especially this far out, it's hard to know that yet.
Because it really puts you out to be criticized and everything.
For sure.
When you're running.
Right.
But one would hope in the process of building this plan, leadership would evolve, right? People would find the interest, they would get involved with this, they would understand what the concepts are that are underlying it. And I think that's when the leadership would start to emerge and make themselves known. But, we have a year. Again, let me reiterate, and Wayne's brought this up. We are so ahead of the game on this.
Yeah.
Most communities don't even think about this till long after they've agreed, elected or voted to go through with it. So the fact that we're having this conversation and talking to you about a structure is just to share with you the idea that there is a plan and there's a plan to get to a plan, but we don't have the plan yet. And we want to involve the community in the construction of that. And we have a year to do it.
We know what the pieces are. We just don't know what the timing is yet necessarily, or what's going to be accepted. Yes, ma'am. I'm picking you because I think I missed 2 or 3. You had your arm up like the longest back then. So.
Thank you. I didn't need one of these. I'm one of those people. I'm too loud, Lily. I guess the point that's really important to me here is I feel like my vote really doesn't carry a lot of weight currently because of the size of the county. And I feel like even though, there's truly no way for us to know who's going to throw their name in the hat unless they want to speak out and say, yep, I'm going to run. But we don't even know yet. We haven't even chosen the form of government that we'll have. It's early on to know those things. And boy, I think every one of us would like to be able to know that we're going to get the right answer for all the elected officials and all the things, but it just doesn't work that way. But I do feel like having our own government puts us so much closer to the pin because we then know that our vote is going to heavily impact what happens when our vote doesn't really do much in the county elections. And to me, that's super important.
Yep.
So we're 45 minutes into this and we're on the first slide. I encourage the conversation. But we do get kicked out of here eventually.
How many slides do you have?
I think there's only like 5 or 6.
There's not a ton of slides, luckily.
We'll be home by breakfast.
I had to restrain Nick. Nick was like, hey, let's detail this slide. And 20 more bullets here. And I'm like, no, please, no.
Not gonna let you forget.
All right, so here's probably the most effective tool, which as a group before the city's incorporated, we can exercise. You could ask the county officials to do this, or you could ask the county officials in some other way, maybe by negotiation with developer contacts or whatever, to just kind of hold off until the city is incorporated. But if they are not willing to do that, but they are willing to take formal action, you can declare a moratorium on all development for a particular time frame. 6 months is the state legal limit for that. There are different restrictions or reasons that you can put on that. It's even possible to extend it, but you don't want to get too crazy with that because then you start getting challenged by the state, and then that starts a whole nother problematic ball rolling. But that's the tool. It can be done. Yes.
Okay.
Okay. I was going to go into this American civics pop quiz for everybody out there, but in the interest of Nick here, we're going to maybe I might save it for a little bit later. Okay. We talked about the foundational assumptions. The only purpose of this slide is to sort of re-illustrate the things we've kind of already talked about and the things that we really haven't or didn't really come up in the LRB feasibility study, right? Everything on the left column, you're all aware of this. You see it or you don't see it performed out there every day. And the stuff on the right, my right, is stuff that you might not really normally think about, but you absolutely have to have ready to go on day one when we incorporate. So part of the transition plan would be going out and talking to various providers. Every single one of these here can be provided by contract service, by the way. You may not want to. I've always been a big proponent in my city management career of having your own full-time city attorney that isn't conflicted any other way, but that's really expensive. And you may not want to do that right off the bat. Maybe eventually you do, probably at the beginning you don't. My point is all of that stuff isn't really hard to secure. You just got to be aware that it's on the to-do list and we got to get it checked off. Any questions on that slide? Nick's so happy. There you go. Okay. Roles and responsibilities. Oh, yeah. So we were just talking about the right column stuff in a little bit more of detail. So contract management, I don't think there's really anything there that you haven't seen before. Legal side, I would say that is probably the very first thing you want to do. And if possible, you may even want to get an attorney on board before you're incorporated. And there are ways to do that too, by the way. You can get municipal attorneys that provide contract services, knowing that this is a municipal startup. Oftentimes, maybe that's optimistic, but sometimes will delay their billing until such time as you got revenues coming in, that sort of thing. But I hit that point just because without good sound legal advice, contract review, that sort of thing, you really can't do any of the rest of it. So you got to get a lawyer first.
Is this a slide you were thinking about when you said that the feasibility study underestimated the costs of
Yes,
administrative services?
exactly so. That's exactly right. Did everybody hear that? Okay, Kim asked, is this the slide or are these the services I was thinking of when in last week's presentation, I was talking about how I thought LRB had underestimated the general administrative services costs. And that's exactly right. I just don't see that $250,000 is going to cover all of these. And they're not even all listed here. There are some other ones too. So that's from a realistic standpoint why I was saying that. Okay, finance. How do you all say it here? Finance or finance?
Finance.
I grew up in like 6 different places. I can never remember which one's the local version. Same sort of thing. You need to have that early, but it would be okay to have that one with a contract just ready to go at the beginning of January to be incorporated. HR, again, that's probably another one that's sort of a minor function right off the bat because you don't even know if or how many staff you would really hire at first. It's probably going to be pretty minimal, I would guess. Recorder you got to have. So maybe right after lawyer is recorder, frankly. And then IT also very quick. That might be number 3 or number 4. But so again, that kind of gives you a flavor for the checklist. The checklist, again, like I say, I've seen one we've kind of bandied about, Nick and I have looked at. It's 3 pages long. But this kind of gives you the basic feel. Yes.
Could I ask Kay Larison, I see the back, who basically knows all about how Huntsville does this, right, Kay? You know how they do it.
Mayor.
Well, Richard, I didn't see you. We've got the two people from Huntsville town that really know this.
I noticed they're sitting in the back corner.
Would you
Because-
comment? Would you comment, please? Richard, if not you, Kate, anybody?
Okay, you're on the spot now. Mayor Sorensen.
Go first.
Okay. One of the first things that, when I saw the plan, Wayne, was, and I asked this question at the last meeting, does anybody put together a budget?
Right,
Because I think I sent this to Jeannie, actually, this question.
yeah,
Have you considered all of these, and you've
Right.
got them listed here? And the fact that you had added some more money on for that, put my mind at ease, because
Yeah.
I know what it costs.
Had you reviewed the LRB feasibility study?
I have looked at it.
Okay, all right,
not
so
in depth.
so you saw
I'm
the
not
number.
in by any means, but,
So you did see that number, Kate? Yeah, so you agree with me?
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's good.
if your attorney alone is gonna cost you.
You can get contract services for less than you have to pay a full-time one, but still, yeah, it's gonna be way expensive. There's no question.
Higher legal services.
So I agree with Kay. We have the luxury of already having all this in place, so we started 100 years ago, so we're just kind of taking the ball and running with it still and continuing on, so.
Right,
So startup costs, there will be, I've skimmed over the LRB proposal, but I haven't felt it.
Yeah. but yeah, for sure, you're seeing a budget
Well,
on an annual basis.
T alone can cost you a whole bunch of money. depending
Yeah, oh,
on
yeah.
what you do.
And,
And you've got to have those elections run and
Right.
certain requirements. Plus, the Office of State Auditor has certain requirements
Yep.
for every municipality
right,
that are wide range.
right.
So,
Right. Well, and I'll make another point to that, which again kind of goes to why we don't know. We know what we need, but we don't necessarily know how much it'll cost or how much we need to have yet. The auditor, that just made me think of this, Kate. When I was in West Valley, our audit cost us like $125,000 a year. That's not going to be the case here. I also served on the boards of lots of other nonprofit entities where the audit was $10,000 a year. I don't know what it's going to look like here until we go out and actually talk to an auditor and find out. But that's one of the numbers you got to go out and find before you get going. Mayor, sorry to
So
help
just
you up.
a practical example, just recently, actually before, we had to get it done fast because of the incorporation of the post incorporation, but we annexed some land around Pineview to encompass our Century Point area. And so to do that, we annexed several Forest Service lands. And so we hired our contracted engineering firm to do that for us. And it was taking them or him an excessive amount of time. We were under the gun because we had to get it done for this incorporation.
Right.
And anyway, long story short, we have a small budget and it cost us $11,000 and just with engineering. We were totally dumbfounded. Our property taxes are about $105,000 a year or so, and our sales tax is probably $170,000 a year. And so $11,000 of that is.
Right, it's a big chunk.
So.
I have one.
Did you have a
another
question?
for Richard?
Or, okay, all right.
Richard, you've lived in Huntsville for a long, long time. And your forefathers did too. So one of the concerns I've heard is, do we have the people that will step up and run for office, run for mayor? In the history that you know in Huntsville, which is kind of like the rest of the valley, kind of. What's your experience? Do you think people are out there that will step up to do this?
So I absolutely do. People tend to, I think, trust their elected officials, and so sometimes they get lax, and there have been elections over time that it's hard to find somebody to run or to fill a position, open position. But we only have 700 people in town though, so the rest of the valley is much larger. So we have had times where it's hard to find somebody, but then when push comes to shove, somebody always steps up. And there have been many times where people run unopposed. every time I've ran, I've been opposed though, so.
Jan?
Yes, I have a question. Assuming, we make the ballot, we have the election, and we vote to incorporate. So now we have that 1 year before our elected officials are in place. However, there will be taxes collected,
Mhm.
okay, for the year 2024.
Mhm.
And now we are officially incorporated. So do we get that money then to kind of prime the pump?
No.
And- No.
Now, that's the short answer and then the technically correct answer. The other answer is you can go to the county and negotiate and say, hey, fair's fair, or we need this, or we're gonna contract with you for that anyway. So how about you cut us a deal here, that sort of thing. Or even get a loan from the county. Sometimes when cities start up, they'll go back to the county they went from and get a short-term loan for just until the revenues start kicking in. But to your specific question about, like, for example, how I'll just use property taxes as the example. You're not entitled as a municipality for any property taxes until either the January 1st, I'm going to mess this up, January 1st or before, so meaning like between that date of election, then you get you're entitled to those property taxes going forward. But if you wait, meaning if we did this incorporated in January 1st of 26, you're not, if I remember this correctly, you're not entitled to the 25 property taxes. You're only entitled for the 26 property taxes. And if you wait till January 2nd, you're not even entitled to the 26 taxes. You don't get taxes until 27. So that's one of the very specific time frame things you need to make sure happens.
Question.
Yes,
So after we were on the ballot and we passed and we have this 11 months, can we, after we've gotten passed and we're incorporated, during that time period, can we do fundraisers? Are we allowed to do anything we want to start generating funds?
Short answer to that is yes. And the reason I say that is I know of no statutory thing that prohibits that.
Okay. And people can donate?
Sure. Yep, absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
I've often wondered, maybe we should take a poll of the group here. I've often wondered why particular cities with some marketing don't go to like McDonald's and or wherever, Maverick, and say, hey, you want to round up your last dollar to the city for the new park or the whatever they're buying? I don't know, maybe that's just wouldn't be very popular.
Or sticking out there with the food.
Yeah. Okay, other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I'm a little confused. I just want some clarification. Are we gonna start then in debt?
Not gonna start in.
Go in,
Right.
if we get a loan.
You're not gonna start in debt.
It's gonna taxes raise and
No.
significantly for that?
That's not an assumption that you have to make. You are gonna start with no revenues in the bank.
Mhm.
So the decisions you make right after that and however you procure services will affect that. And yes, I would assume no matter what, even if it's a really small amount, as you go forward in those first few weeks or months, yeah, there's going to be some money you're going to owe. But let me again use the example of the attorney, for example. Attorneys that I have spoken with have said, listen, I know you're a startup. I'm going to be contracting with you on like a semi-annual or an annual basis. I know your revenues won't start till then. I'll be billing hours, but you won't have to pay me until that revenue comes in. Okay.
Okay, I get that, but what about these people that this is gonna be their full-time job? They
Yeah.
can't sit there and say, I can hold off for 6 months till you
Right,
have money.
Right.
So how do they get paid if we're not raising taxes?
We'll have to raise taxes again, but what you will have to do is raise some short-term funds other ways. Like I mentioned, I forget who asked the question, but you could go back to the county and say, hey, can I get a short-term loan? For the revenues that are going to be coming in this year. Or there are also other, what are called in various forms, municipal short-term loan mechanisms through banks. the technical term from it used to be back when I was in school decades ago, so it's probably not even called this anymore, but they were called tax anticipation notes or TANs. Basically granted to a municipality on the basis that, hey, I know your property tax in this amount is going to come in November. I'm going to loan you this amount until then, and then you pay that loan back in that month.
Do the receivables get paid quickly by the state, for example, for sales tax? Or is it like a 2-month thing before you
Quicker
get?
than property tax, but there still will be a lag. Well, my understanding is it's about a 90-day lag.
So it's long.
Yeah. But then once it starts, sales tax comes in on a monthly basis. So then you've got a steady stream after that. Property tax is a lot more lumpy.
So the first 3 months are gonna be tough.
Yeah, but again, like I say, knowing that up front, you can do things to minimize that. For example, to the good lady's question, you're probably not going to want to go out and hire 10 or 20 or 30 people, right? You're probably going to have 1 or 2 people just to get things up and running, be able to answer the phones and call whoever the IT contractor is. How come the website's not working, or stuff like that. So you'll minimize those costs best as you can in the very beginning, knowing that you'll have other.
I got the mic. So this is an important technical question, but we're not the first city to incorporate.
Correct.
Every city goes through this. Those people that start this up at the very technical level will have to figure out, do they need a loan from the county or whatever, and that sort of thing. But I don't, to me, it's a very technical thing that, we don't need to worry too much about right now.
Yeah, good point. And again, and then I'll sort of end on it. So much of that answer depends on how you approach the particular question, right? Again, because like I'm saying, you could either forego the service for a little while, or maybe you do decide, nope, we got to have that. So we're going to take out a loan. We're going to pay for it. Or you negotiate some contract where you're not paying until time for it. All of those aspects play into each other.
Forgive me, but I'm an attorney.
Very good.
So,
Okay.
retired attorney. But, not all attorneys only sit in an office, only practicing law. It is so very common, even in very large organizations, to have them multitask, different clients, different lines of business, etc. In a small startup, it's very common to see the lawyers also run HR. It's common to see, for example, I'm an employment and labor lawyer. Half the time I sat in HR and was director of labor relations. Other times I was in the law department sitting in HR meetings. So it's common to combine that. You could also combine contract management with a municipal attorney who's an expert at municipal law. So there are lots of different ways. You don't need to have staff for each and every one of those functions. You can look at combining them.
The other point I'll make is that there are attorneys that are actually part-time attorneys that split their time between multiple cities. And so these are experts in their field, and they use, you use them on an as-needed basis. And that's another approach on how you could stand that up. But yes, an attorney is one of the first things you're going to want. And you're going to want your own because you're going to be doing business with Weber County, and you're going to want that skill set on your side to address theirs.
Contract questions, right? Brandy first. Oh, wait. Yeah, Brandy, and then the gentleman right in front of you.
Any municipal funds or anything that are sitting there that we can like say those should be allocated a portion to us because we're 3%.
You didn't come to last week's meeting, huh?
Sorry, I did not.
Oh, that's okay. The short and unfortunate answer is probably not, but there are some that you could go back and negotiate with the county and say, hey, impact fees, for example. We built homes and we built commercial enterprises here in the valley, and those enterprises generated a particular amount of impact fees that went in, and there's a bunch of different impact fee categories, so to speak. And those have to be spent in a very restricted manner by state statute, and they should be designated to our valley. What about it? Are you guys going to work with us? Okay, yes, sir.
Howard, this is a general question.
Salaries as we hire people.
How are we gonna pay salaries?
How are we gonna benchmark them?
Well, benchmark. Great question.
I could come in here and,
Yeah.
ask for $1 million salary.
Right. So one of the points we didn't, remember how I was saying the list is actually kind of 3 pages long, but we condensed it down here and put it on this one slide. One of the points we had on that list is a employee salary benchmarking, survey or study. Those are pretty readily available out there in the state. We used to contract this third-party firm that did it for county or cities across the state. They would basically generate a report every year and we would pay for that service at the city. And it's probably a lower cost for smaller cities, but even for us as West Valley City, it wasn't that much money. It was pretty inexpensive. Now, there are other ways to do that too. If you're really worried about it, you can come in or go out, hire a contractor, have them come in and conduct a whole custom to your own entity study like that. But I don't think that really would be necessary.
Or it's all open data, you can just look up 3 cities.
Yeah, that's right. The Tribune used to keep online how much everybody made.
Utah.gov.
Oh, it's all on there now. That's right.
It was in the paper, but you had to have magnifying glasses.
Government employees, huh? Takes up that much room.
The website was at the end of the article, so you could go there if you couldn't see it.
So good question. Something, I don't foresee that as being a real problem, but it's something you got to keep in mind for sure. Okay, next slide.
Just one
Yes,
thing.
ma'am.
What I hear you saying with this gap funding, so you've got revenue coming in, but the city starts before, so you've got this gap.
Right.
And so this gap funding is you just take out a short-term loan using the tax revenue that's going to be coming as collateral, basically.
Right. That's right.
To cover this gap funding. So it's pretty easy to get that kind of funding because it's almost guaranteed.
Very good point. In fact, that's I'm glad you brought that up because one other point I was going to make was we kind of tend to think of this as like a startup business, right? And in many ways it is. But in one way it's not, it's not like you're starting a new bakery and you don't know if customers are coming in month to month across the next 12 months. You know your property tax is going to generate this much money and you know sales tax is going to come in, whatever level it is come in, whatever the feasibility says and what the variation is, but you know it's going to come in. So that's right. Okay, org structure. So the only reason we put this up was we just kind of wanted to show that we don't know what it's going to look like, obviously by the labels, right? But we do know it's going to have some various elements. It's going to have the elected officials, and it's going to have the citizens. Every org chart you go out to in the state, if you ever go look at the budget, they're always going to say the citizens are at the top. And they're always going to have the green ones next, which are the elected officials. And then everything underneath that is what everybody else that reports to the elected officials. The reason we put the blue and the gray, if that's the right color, is we were just trying to denote some of those people are going to be in-house, some of those are going to be contractor. We don't know what the mix is going to be, but it'll look something like this, and that'll be part of the transition plan too. It's defining, again, sort of the same discussion as with the municipal codes. What's the general consensus of what that should look like?
And typically the one blue box that's over here to the right is your lawyer. That one always seems to be hanging out by itself, lording over everyone else.
No one likes the lawyer, that's why.
They're kicked to the side.
I think it's really more, nobody's really ever quite sure who the lawyer really works for.
The citizens.
Or she, yes.
This is probably out there, but
You can't hear in the back.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
this is probably an out there question, but what happens if the present commissioners are not reelected? Does that affect us in any way? Does it
No.
change anything up?
That's a good question, but
Is it?
no, because we're on a process as defined by the state through the lieutenant governor's office. The county commission really has no say about that, no matter what their setup looks like. If I understood the question correctly.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any questions on organizational structure would look like, or
And-
thoughts of preference or that sort of thing?
And obviously it would evolve over time. Some of the gray boxes may turn blue, so on and so forth. Some of them are part-time and as needed. So it's an evolutionary process as we grow and become more profitable and need more services.
We're gonna be voting for this in November, what it'll look like.
No.
What you vote for is the structure of the green boxes.
Yes, you'll vote for the form of government, which will be reflected only
Yeah.
at the green level.
Yeah.
But
But
it's a holding place, I thought, that's not locked, right? Like,
Ye-
my understanding was that in November, let's say, they say, do you want A or B? But we're not locked into A or B.
You are.
If we then decide we want C.
You're not locked into that forever. There is a 4-year time period defined by state law between switching.
So what are our options?
there's a lecture coming up on that, sir.
But basically the two are mayor, council, or council manager. And I think Utah law calls council manager something else, but it's something like that.
So does that include the name of the city? Is
Uh,
is
the-
that set in stone?
The election question won't include that, and it's not set in stone. And my personal recommendation, this is just me putting in my 2 cents. Yeah, we need a different name. I don't like that. But to Mark and the committee's particular point, they had to put something in there because you had to get the process going.
So, so we decided to pick something that was universally disliked and that way, but honestly, that's one of the first things that you can change once you become a city is you can fix that. But
That was a damn city.
yeah,
I like-
From the valley of hell.
there you
I like the one- Mark went out and did that, Mark Farron went out and did that little survey over at the school, and some young wit wanted dirt bike city, which I like. Yes, ma'am.
So, and I'll be loud. Thank you. So if I understand that in November, if this is on the ballot, what we're looking at is a yes or no to incorporation and which form of government, A or B, do we want?
Yes.
correct.
Right?
Yep. And that's pretty much it. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
And what is that?
When is that what?
What is that about the A or B?
Oh, not September 10th, is it?
Keep going.
Maybe it is.
Keep going. Right there.
Oh, yeah, it is September 10th.
It's September 10th. We wanted to be fresh in your mind when it comes time for election.
Do you guys, just as sort of by poll, do you guys all see that as like a really difficult question or a controversial question? Or do you wonder how many variations there are? Because I don't really. I mean, preferentially, just by trade and experience, I vastly prefer the council manager form of government. But by size of city and startup and budgetary reasons and that sort of thing, a council or mayor's council is probably well, certainly the way most cities go when they start up, I'll say that. Okay?
I know that, Morgan County used to share a manager with 2 other
That's right. That happens.
municipalities.
Yep. That's not that
They share a
uncommon.
manager between 3 of them.
Right. That's not totally uncommon. How any manager wants to put himself through or herself through 2 or 3 council meetings a week, I have no idea. But yes, ma'am.
I was just gonna share that, in a city I lived in, the mayor was like a figurehead. He basically was a volunteer. And that his role was, like, your dog is yapping too much on at night.
And they complain to that person?
Right,
Right.
just try to do general, adjudication, if you will.
Yeah.
Ribbon cutting ceremonies.
All the pain and none of the power. That sounds.
Yes.
Huntsville's a mayor, city council, correct? 5 members?
Okay, 4 council members and a mayor.
Okay.
Well, 5 mayor to vote.
Unpaid, everybody's not paid.
They're all paid,
They're all paid.
yes. That was wrong. Mark said that at the last meeting, and the mayor gets a monthly salary, and the council gets a monthly stipend, basically. You know how much? I do. I'm not sure. I guess it's public knowledge. You want to share how much you make a year?
$500 million.
I'm allowed to say that.
I make about $1,000 a month.
Collectively, the town pay, or the town pays out just shy of $17,000.
A year.
Mayor Sorensen, are you underpaid?
I'm sure he is.
That'll do for money. Yeah.
I will say, with all due respect to the mayor, that the council members are usually more underpaid than the.
I've been in, not playing, I've been in 4 meetings all day today, and I've rescheduled tomorrow. So.
That's a good point. That's true. The mayors usually have to go to a bunch more meetings. That's true.
I have a question that's like that.
Okay, I'm gonna go to this gentleman, and then we'll come back to you, Kim.
At what point in time does the county commissioners lose any authority over what we review to be done in the incorporation?
What was the question?
Chase says, at what point do the county commissioners lose their power?
Oh,
over
lose.
the area.
Yeah. Upon incorporation.
Which is 26.
26. Right,
yeah.
January 2026.
We're gonna have a big party.
No,
Not
Kim.
ready yet.
Okay, did you have another question, ma'am? No, okay. All right, good. Next. We really talked about a lot of this already, somewhat defined by state law, we talked about kind of the election cycle and when incorporation happens. We have plenty of examples up there of other cities. I talked about lawyer and recorder. We talked about foundational elements. Further activities dependent on funding and need, like changing the name, stuff like that. Other things that come up that the group and the community would want to spend more effort on.
Remember my question?
Yes.
Body politic. So there's a concept, as I understand it, that the county commissioners are obligated to be the body politic of our water companies, I think, and the sewer companies. Districts, the districts. So there's this, and I know they complain about how many meetings they have to go to. That's one of the reasons I was thinking of this. So we have this large number of water companies and some sewer companies and other districts. Is this an obligation for our city to take over as the body politic? Does anybody know the answer to this?
The answer, unless somebody's got some better information, is no, or not.
I believe the answer to that is no. These special districts, water, sewer being one of them, the translator being one, the cemetery. Once they become a district, it's then a state entity. And all that is defined under state code. And it stays that way, and the body politic stays the same.
Yep.
The county, would
Yep.
be the county.
Okay, thanks.
I can give you some input on that too. So many of these water companies they're private corporations, like Eden Water Works is a private corporation. No government entity at all has any power over us. So you wouldn't be taking on anything. We just run our own show, and many of the companies that are like that in the area do that. So none of that would change.
Yes, ma'am. Okay.
So that being said, if the town then allows a building permit for building in an area that Eden Water District has control over, that individual then contracts with Eden Water, and the city is not involved in that water relationship.
Yeah.
We would just,
that before you give permit.
Okay.
Yeah, what happens now is if somebody wants Eden Water Works to supply their property with water, before the county will give them a building permit, they require a letter from us that says we will provide them water, and that letter's good for a year. And this is where I'll make an editorial comment. This is where the county is failing right now because they are rezoning land without requiring that letter up front. They're only worrying about the letter once they start issuing building permits. And that, in my opinion, is a huge mistake because you've already changed the use of this land, which, as far as I know, can't be unwound.
You can rezone land.
Can you?
You can't unwind a development if it starts already happening.
Okay.
And there's a lot of controversy associated with rezoning land.
Right.
Obviously, owner concern, that sort of thing, but yes, it can be
The
done.
failure, in my opinion, is they are not looking at that water situation prior to the rezone. And even when it's pointed out to them, because I had a meeting with them and pointed it out, the attitude is we don't care. So
you took notes on that, right?
I recorded the
WE.
Okay, did I miss anybody for questions on that? Okay, were there any other slides? Oh, budget. We talked about this too. See, all these questions got asked already through the whole process.
Well, then we're done here.
Yeah.
Smart.
Content format, defined by state code. That's a point I might want to talk a little bit about. And Kate kind of alluded to this, I think. So we have sort of this proposed like feasibility study budget, right? Obviously, that's not a detailed budget. There is an actual format that you have to go in that's prescribed by the state that actually has numeric codes for separate categories of expenditures like personnel or capital expenses or what's another one? Professional services, that sort of thing. It's very set. It's pretty much plug in. All you really have to do, and this is of course the tough part, is know what the numbers are actually going to be. So that would be part of the transition plan process. And I don't know, anybody got any other questions on budget?
I have one.
Of course, we went through like 2 hours of this last week, so I'm not really asking because I want.
So, are there grants available to help cities get started? Or follow-up question is, if we were to put a team together to look at all the possible grants that we could get, could we give that to the, can we get that ball rolling to hand that off to a new city council?
Okay, so from the last question going back, the answer is yes, you could. As far as what grants are available for new cities, I don't really know of any. I've never heard of that before, but that doesn't mean there aren't. And then the other point I was going to make on that is that's actually another one of the areas which a city that is incorporated can have a lot more effect on its own. Mayor, for example, if I put you on the spot for a sec, you're probably pretty well involved with the League of Cities and Towns, I would guess, right? Yeah. And you probably, either you or somebody by assignment works with the state legislatures up there during the session. Maybe you even have some lobbying services, I don't know, but no. You do not. Okay, but the point is that once you have a city, you can pursue all that stuff at your own policy direction level, right? I mean, whereas going to the county commissioners right now, it's pretty hard to get them motivated to go seek grants or state funding or federal funding for us here in Ogden Valley. Now, there's another aspect of that as well to keep in mind, which is grants application expertise and grants financial management can get kind of expensive. So you gotta balance that as well. So you just got to make sure that what you're applying for is real and it's feasible and it's worth it. Because sometimes you get grants that cost more in administering them than they're worth having, frankly. Okay. Anything else? Are there any more slides? Is there next one? More. Oh, process. Okay. Develop plan for the community. Input, we talked about that. Subject matter experts. We have a lot here internally, and I know many out there that we've already tapped. I really have no qualms that there are people out there that you can ask about this. And as I forgot who it was that made the point, but yeah, this is not new. People have been doing this over and over. Certainly throughout the three decades of my career, I've seen it happen again and again. It can be done, and it can be done well. And the reference to state code is really just more of a, we got to make sure that we follow state code as we're going through it. And not forget things like, again, I was mentioning the January 1 incorporation date, deadline, that sort of thing.
And I did look into this before, as we were getting started. Has anybody actually written all this down and have a starter kit that we could leverage? There really isn't, although he met with the Mill Creek attorney that helped set that community up, who shared some information with us, but it's nowhere near as comprehensive as what we're talking about here. So when we get this thing finished, I think we should publish it and make a lot of money off it, right?
Well, that's where you were going.
Right?
I was wondering.
So this is going to be my career and how I'm going to retire. Oh, wait, I am retired. Wait a minute. Never mind.
Yes, Mayor.
So you mentioned the Utah League of Cities and Towns, which we belong to. They're a great organization. But along with that, we belong to the Utah Government's Trust, is that what it's called?
Oh, yeah, for insurance.
So they do our insurance, but they also, legal fees have been mentioned many times. We have our own town attorney who, as we mentioned before, they typically work for several different towns. And ours is a great attorney. We get him for a very good value. He's very generous to us. But if we ever had litigation, which thankfully we don't have very often, but if we ever have litigation, then the Utah Government's Trust
Good point.
assigns an attorney to us, which
pretty set and dried, and you know what your liability is and what could happen. There's lots of things that could happen from a liability standpoint, but the insurance options that we have out there at the city are really pretty robust, and local government's trust is one of the best for sure.
that is one thing I've heard mentioned many times, is the concern about legal fees and lawyers.
Yep.
And in our experience, we've had pretty good luck with.
Yeah. Good to hear. Okay, well, thanks very much, everybody. Appreciate it.
So this question is maybe directed at the sponsors more. So I think this is wonderful that this much thought has gone into this and continues to go into this, and it's a great job. So I appreciate this. But the election is in 90 days. Is there a campaign manager on the sponsors side that is, beginning to work towards, getting volunteers and activism in the community, and running the campaign to get this thing over the finish line? Because I would hate for it to have come this far and then not have someone who's going to bring it over the finish line.
So I'm not going to speak to that, not my lane. So I'm going to let the sponsors of the committee, who I know they have
Yes,
to.
there is a campaign manager and I'm it.
That was not set up. That was not set up.
Let's roll, but someone's got to do it. No, and we have other people working on that campaign who have had lots of experience with other campaigns. And so we are well on our way to putting together our winning campaign, I assure you. What we do need are volunteers.
There you go.
And so please see me after this meeting. We intend to have fun, be creative, but be informative and factual about how we campaign. And we're going to do as much outreach to the community and ask what are their concerns, as we frankly do of trying to convince them of the legitimacy of the whole ballot proposition of incorporation. Because we know we're feasible. Now, 2 different studies prove it. We need to share that message with the voters so they get a comfort level that we really will be concerned about what they want going forward. So see me after.
So basically, what, up until now, our emphasis has really been on trying to get this petition on the ballot. And as you saw from the very beginning of this, that process is closed now. It's really up to the Weber County and the Lieutenant Governor's office to sign off on what we've submitted. But now we've kind of split the team into two. So now we have the campaign manager working on getting the vote out and ensuring that people understand why we're doing this and how we can be successful. And then we have another group head up by me who's working on the transition plan. So when we become a city, not if, when we become a city, then what's the process? What are we going to have to go through and how prepared are we? And that's what this is all about. So that's it in a nutshell. Thank you all for coming. Obviously stick around and ask us questions if you have more. And as I mentioned earlier, I want to talk to my team before you guys go. Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Again.
What?
Wait.
Huh? Yeah, stick around.
Except.
All right, we're done. Thank you all. That's the end of the meeting.